Seeing that it's 10:15, we'll go ahead and get the Finance and Administration meeting in order for March 7th, 2023. So we are going to call the session of Finance and Administration Committee to order. The first item on the agenda is our first set of public comments. Do we have anyone here that would like to make a comment?
Yep, I'm Teresa White, Robinson Township. In rewatching last month's finance meeting, your questions about ARPA meetings and minutes. There are ARPA money meetings within the Housing Commission meetings. These started last spring. You can look these up on the links of My Ottawa Here, the Department of Strategic Impact. The Housing Commission meetings are monthly, right here in Fillmore Complex. Anyone can attend. Surprising that no commissioners serve on that commission as a commission of this board. They have received at least 10 million in ARPA money. That is where the nonprofit with the 2-year contract needs to keep reporting monthly. Chairman Moss and Administrator Gibbs have authority there as written in the Ottawa County Code Book. There is a lot of information on discussions, projects, even the guests and the nonprofits who receive the bucket money. It is all within the 2022 meeting minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments? Public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second. I would actually like to make a motion to amend the agenda, and this is not a surprise. We just are we just want to call out that there was an action request that needed to be on the agenda that we would just like to call out as being part of the agenda, and that would go under number 10, budget adjustment. So maybe we want to make that an A, just to highlight the fact that this is something that we're dealing with underneath budget adjustments.
Okay, and that's for the Enviro Clean Services?
Yes, it's for the Enviro Clean Services.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor for amending the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, hearing none, we move on. All right, consent agenda resolutions. Do I have a motion to approve the consent resolution?
Quick question.
Sure.
So we had a motion to amend the agenda. Do we also have to vote to approve the amended agenda?
Oh, I apologize.
I think we do.
Okay. All right, so do we have a vote to approve the amended agenda?
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, now we can move on to the agenda and the action requests. We have a motion.
Move to accept the consent resolutions. Support.
Thank you. Yeah, out of order. All right. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Sorry, I had a question on one of them.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Which one? Go ahead.
There was one that just didn't have an employee's name written for, under the mileage request. So I just wanted to make sure that was updated. Oh, that was under consent resolutions. I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself. Under statement of review, correct? I might be all out of, sorry, you go ahead. I think I'm off at the moment. I withdraw my comment at the moment.
There's a lot to go over, so I totally
Sorry about that.
appreciate it. So, yeah, statement of review is pages 6 through 11.
Mhm.
All right. So can we go ahead and move forward? to
Yes, go
approve
ahead.
the
Sorry about that.
consent resolution? That is fine. That is fine. It'll get smoother. All right. So do I have a motion to approve the consent resolutions?
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, we move on then to the agenda and action items requests. So number one is a statement of review. Suggested motion is to approve the statement of review for the month of February 23rd.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. Any discussion?
That was the one that I had. I just noticed that the name was left off of one of the mileage request items. So not a big deal. I just wanted to make sure the person's name was added to it. That's all.
I think we had, a situation where there was publication of a lot of information, so it was removed, but the original actually.
But the name actually, there's one mileage request under statement review that there's no name. So I don't know if that's pertinent, but currently,
Allison, if I may, I could. look
okay,
up for you.
thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
All right. Next is accounts payable for January 27th, 2023 through February 24th, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve the general claims in the amount of $15,348,523.83 as presented by the summary report for January 27th through 2023 through February 24th, 2023.
Support.
Any discussion? Discussion? All right, all those in favor to support the motion? Say aye.
I guess I would make that motion and then Commissioner Bonema could support. It needed someone to make it first.
So moved.
So moved.
I'll support that then.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Does this need to be roll
I think it
call
needs to be
because of
roll
the?
call because it is financial, correct?
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, number 3 on the agenda and action items is vehicle addition. Do I have a motion to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the request to purchase a crisis intervention team vehicle?
So moved.
Do I have support?
Support.
Do we have discussion?
Good morning, Karen Karasinski, Fiscal Services Director. Thank you. I'm going to start this item and then Lynn Doyle is also here to answer any questions you may have. So during the budget process, we review our fleet. We have an ongoing contractual relationship with Enterprise Fleet Management. And so we look at maintenance and mileage, and we have a for say all the sheriff vehicles, we really have a standard. We're replacing those vehicles on a timely basis. This vehicle was an addition. It is related to the crisis intervention team. So the crisis intervention team is 100% grant funded, and that grant authorized the approval of a trailer. The trailer was approved because the crisis intervention team regularly goes throughout the county and does some training to public safety and other agencies on crisis intervention in a mental health situation. The trailer was approved by the grant. We realized that community mental health does not have a vehicle that is sufficient to pull the trailer. So we did not obviously want to proceed on purchasing the trailer until we had a vehicle that could pull it. We looked at other vehicles that CMH does manage and own, and there was no vehicle that could pull this trailer. It's my understanding they take about 11 large totes when they do these trainings. And so we worked with Enterprise and got a price on a used vehicle for $28,000. I said in the action item, when I wrote this up, I just said or similar because I'm not sure that that exact vehicle is going to be available once we go through this process. The funding for this vehicle would come from millage funds. So there were funds, community mental health millage funds are accounted for separately. There was a budget put forward with some contractual services where there's some savings halfway through the year or approximately halfway through the year to dedicate buying this vehicle to support this program. The trailer itself would be grant funded. The team itself is grant funded.
Any have questions? They've answered a few that I had. So the rationale for the minivan choice, we're not going to be transporting people in it other than our employees. Is that accurate?
Well, I think there was some discussion about when the crisis intervention team does go to a site, that there may be a transportation need if someone needs to be taken for care. And currently they are getting into a sheriff's vehicle. And so they thought that this potentially could be used as another or as a better solution for that transportation if the instance was right.
And then there was also, I had questions about just like, will the millage then be charged for like gas, insurance, repairs? And then if the millage isn't extended, do we have a plan?
Right. So if it would be charged for gas and maintenance on the vehicle. The millage in effect would own the vehicle. That fund would own the vehicle. So they would be charged with all of the repairs and gas to maintain the vehicle. If the millage wasn't extended, we would have to look at getting rid of the vehicle or making alternative solutions for the vehicle. So we'd have to look at a lot of factors if the millage funds weren't extended, but this would just be one part of that.
And do you know, is there like an estimated cost for those items? And I guess you don't even necessarily have to have it today, but could we get an estimate on that?
Sure. I mean, the mileage, we have a card where we buy throughout the county. We don't pay, we don't pay all the taxes that residents pay because we're due to our organizational type, but it really is driven based on the amount of miles that you drive and then the maintenance. But we could get an estimate of a similar vehicle.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Good question. Thank you.
Commissioner Zelstra?
Yeah, thank you. Just how will this vehicle be marked? Will it be marked CMH? Will it be marked Ottawa County Sheriff or blended marking?
Our
no
vehicles are
marking?
not, other than our public safety vehicles, they are not marked.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then where would the van actually be stored? Is that going to be taken home to a private residence or is that stored at a location the county owns?
Our vehicles stay at the county.
They stay at the county.
This type of vehicle would stay at the county. It doesn't go home with an employee.
And do we depreciate assets like this then?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, Rebecca?
How often would this vehicle be used? Like monthly, weekly, every week, every
I
day?
think the trainings are weekly.
Okay.
I think they're several a month.
That sounds like it might go out for CIT for an intervention, for instance, too. So it might be more than.
More than if it goes out for the intervention, yes.
Do we have insurance that covers, like if we have people from our community in the van?
Yes, the insurance authority does provide coverage.
Okay,
Thank you, Karen.
yeah, thank you.
Not that you're done,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to say
Oh.
thank you for,
Yeah.
the other people might have other questions, but I just wanted to extend my thanks for answering all these questions.
Commissioner Rhodey?
About how often are we estimating it might be used for crisis intervention?
So I'm going to have to refer to Lynn to answer that question.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. So we anticipate that jail, the car will be out at the jail to help with the staff that are out there. We anticipate there'll be about 20 hours a week average for CIT follow-up. So that's going out to places that we've already been and checking to make sure that everything's okay. They've gotten all the resources they need. Community engagement and training, about 4 hours a week. So that's going out to various places and providing the training, educating people about the program. And then there is an additional about 6 hours weekly on average for the jail peer support and reentry efforts. So that's helping people get connected when they're about ready to leave the jail or they've left and we're trying to connect them to resources. So in total, it's about 30 hours a week. We anticipate that vehicle being used.
Okay, one other question that I have is, let's say it's used for crisis intervention. And so I have no idea if this would happen or not, but if it's used for crisis intervention and then transporting, an individual who needs, you know, some care somewhere, like how often do we think that would happen? And if it does happen, what are we doing for safety for the staff? Are we being very careful about which individuals we're actually transporting if we're working in a crisis situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So all of our fleet of vehicles at CMH, we occasionally have to transport the people we work with to doctor's appointments, to the bank, that type of stuff. In a crisis intervention situation, so that's going to have a social worker and a law enforcement, and there will be a law enforcement vehicle there if it's a crisis situation that warrants that level of intervention. And so if that individual needs some extra support and help, they would be transported with the police car.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Seeing none. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna bring this motion to a roll call vote.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you. Moving on to our next action item request is the grant number 4. It's a grant for new environmental sustainability center. The motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a $1 million grant from Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, Eagle, to build a new recycling center on the Grand Valley State University campus. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion? In your packet, it's pages 17 through 48. Are you Kim?
Yep, I'm Kim Walters with Environmental Health.
Great.
No, I'll just make a comment. I'm on the board for solid waste, and this is definitely an initiative that we're trying to do to educate our community on where they can bring some of these items that don't fare well in the landfill and recycle them in a way that is environmentally responsible. And so making that easy for people is a key hurdle in this process. It's going to where the people are, because that's where the trash is, and then making sure that it ends up in the right place.
Exactly.
Some questions.
Yes, please. Commissioner Medema.
All right, thank you. Good morning, Kim.
Good morning.
Commissioner Medema. Thank you for all the items in the packet. I do have some questions. On page 43 of the packet, it mentions the long-term viability. I would just really like to see that fleshed out a little bit more. At the moment, for me, it's a little muddy where the revenue is coming from to pay for the recycling plant once it's built. It mentions options, but not really anything concrete. So I just wondered if you would be willing to speak to that today, or if not today, it can be at a later time.
Yep, I have the answers for you.
Okay.
Yep. What I've done is there's a lot more than what you actually see that I've done, because viability is everything. especially with a building. So what I've gone to do is we've looked into our costs. The grant is covering the infrastructure and infrastructure related materials. 80% of it is covered. That's the 1 million. And then the fund for, it's currently called landfill tipping fee, or 2272, will cover the remaining 200,000 and any additional cost. That fund is 100, not 100%, but mostly covered through a portion of our landfill tipping fees that we receive from our 2 privately owned landfills.
How about after, is that also include like after it's built?
Yep, so once it's built and all the building grant related items, the fund 2272 landfill tipping fee, it's not the best name for it, but that's what it's called, and that will cover it. And it's we've currently projected into, I think, a 5 or 10-year budget with the, projection of this possibly happening, so we could verify the funding is there.
Okay, so that would not be a cost to the county then, because it's coming from there.
So it's all from the tipping fees from the landfills that we receive currently, as well as we do charge for some services. That's the other portion, as well as we do some grants requests.
A couple other questions.
Go ahead.
So my next one, thank you for answering that one. I guess data collecting, I just wondered if there's been a study at all done on showing the need for the project. I guess to me at first glance, it appears to benefit GVSU the most. I'm just wondering how many how many residents would use it that live off campus?
Yeah. So I also kind of short notice. I'm not sure if you were able to receive, I did this little quick sheet thing for you guys as well. It's got a lot of the answers and kind of the stuff that you're looking for as well. All of our centers, so in a nutshell too, this will act as a hub. The state is really pushing for a hub and spoke system, and we actually are perfect setup for it because we have 4 current centers throughout the county, and this will be our centralized hub, as well as all of our services are for all Ottawa County residents. So not just Grand Valley. Well, yes, it benefits them too, because we'll be helping them with some other items as well. But it's for everyone. So part of why we looked at this is the fact that we don't have a good centralized location, as well as the centralized county areas, Allendale. I kind of placed the location map on there so you can kind of see that's where our area of growth for Ottawa is. So they're growing and there's no convenient, easy access to a center. So this will be for everyone, and the current location is on another page of where we're hoping to place it. Is actually located, for my opinion, a good location. It's at the entrance of the Grand Ravines Park. Grand Valley owns land there. They offered it at the time. That's the current site. Will it be there? I can't say 100%, but that's the site that we've talked about with them. And that's very centralized and allow for community engagements in different ways. But yes, it's for all Ottawa County residents to use, not just Grand Valley.
Has there been any, I guess, questions done on who would, like any, I guess, just feeling people out, like, would you use this service if it's provided? Has there been any questions to residents of the county?
So when I first started this project, looking into it, part of this grant is also looking at different types of populations in the sense of, they call it the underserved population is what the state calls it. And that tends to be multi living homes, apartments, condos, those types of places. So recycling is a bigger term than what most people think of as just, your cardboard plastics. It's also electronics, compost, food waste, used oil, those type of things get recycled as well. And they don't have those services always provided. So I did call several departments in the area, and most of them don't even do the basic residential recycling. I talked with Allendale Charter Township. They said they get a lot of contamination, as well as Grand Valley does. Grand Valley gets the public that comes to their current drop-off centers, and a lot of the recycling can't be used because there's trash in it. So they get calls saying this load is not recycling, now it's waste. And that's where the conversation stirred up. One of my future projects to maybe help you ask the question is, I've talked to John Gibbs about it too, is I do hope to eventually do another grant for data collection to really dive in more. But our services are increasing at our current centers, and that's, we're showing that increase of need. And there's no convenient way to get it out into that area. So this is what we're trying to do.
So if we approve this part today, will there be another stage of this that will be presented to the board?
You guys will be seeing this a lot since it's a building.
Okay.
And there's agreements and contracts and stuff. Yeah, so by accepting this grant, the biggest part, it'll allow us to talk to some contractors, start moving forward with the agreements with Grand Valley, which again, all will come to you guys. Any contracts, agreements, any budgetary items, all for my program, all go to the board.
I
Commissioner
noticed,
Brody.
sorry, I noticed that part of this is education.
Big part.
So what does that look like?
Yeah, so that's another thing that we're seeing from our community. Sustainability is becoming a bigger awareness, a bigger thing. People are even like choosing their jobs based on what sustainability efforts that are being seen in that employment. So what this will hopefully do is give us a place. I say sheltered, it sounds kind of weird, but what I mean by is right now my current centers are cement slabs with a bunch of little structures. They can't really house large groups. So I've had Grand Valley students come out, I've had Boy Scouts come out, and we have to really be watching the weather because there's nowhere to house them besides a giant cement slab. That's the best way to think of it, as well as there's no technology that I can provide. So if we want to do any PowerPoints or anything like that, I can't do that currently. And so I'm being asked for things that I can't provide them because I don't have a place to do it, as well as the hope for this is to be able to link several sustainability efforts so that we can show the connection between electronics and recycling and food waste, as well as possibly sustainable building efforts, because demolition and construction efforts are also one of those items that are not being recycled, which has tons of recycled material in it. And these growing issues are coming, and trying to educate on that and awareness of, hey, we don't need to throw away this piece of wood. Look at this building that we're in currently, maybe is built with sustainable efforts in mind, those type of things. So there's no good place for me to educate. So this will be the place to be able to do it for all of us to educate out of.
Okay, so does it provides then a facility that you can teach in this
Yes,
building
yeah,
as
and
well?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and as far as Grand Valley goes, so
Mhm.
I think a lot of us residents are aware that, at the end of the school year, there's a huge turnover. I have friends who clean out the apartments, so there's a lot of trash and mattresses and lots of that kind of stuff that happens at the end of every school year. So I can see the need for something like this to help, deal with all of that. So will you be working with the students and the apartments and stuff like that too, to coordinate some of that?
That's a possibility, right now, there's no building.
Right.
So
Right.
part of this next step will be too, is to talk to the community too, and make sure that, and I've mentioned too at our solid waste planning committee, that make sure that their efforts are also in line with everything that we want to do, that when we build this building, that we have all this in mind, the possibilities, so that we don't build and then see that we could have done more, whether that's within partnerships and within growth. Mattresses you brought up, that's one thing that I hope to be able to do because that's a growing need in the community, especially in that area, as well as other areas, and having to be able to collect it in Holland and bring it into a larger facility like this can grow, just grow so much more. And yes, my efforts are to talk to the community and see what's needed
Okay.
and wanted.
All right. Thanks.
Commissioner Miedema.
All right. Just one other thing. I noticed that it mentioned in our packet that you had received letters of recommendation from Grand Valley as well as Allendale Charter Township. I didn't see them in our packet. So I just wondered if that's something maybe you could submit to us and then that could be uploaded to our work documents that's available to the public as well.
Yeah, I don't have an Allendale one. I can get one easy. Allendale is actually who connected me to Grand Valley. I talked with them because I knew that was the area, and they said that government can be slow sometimes, but we recommend Grand Valley, and Grand Valley was able to give me a letter of recommendation. But yes, I have that. It was required for the grant. Yeah.
Just a comment to the public. Growing up through the Boy Scout organization, I adopted many highways and picked up a lot of litter and discarded tires and other things, because that was what we love to do, is to try to leave our community better than we found it. And for those Boy Scout troops that are out there and other organizations that are doing this, these are facilities that, rather than paying to get rid of this trash that they collect in the community at a local landfill, they can actually bring it to you, which is a savings, right? That's
Yes, yep. All household hazardous waste is no charge for anyone in Ottawa County. You'd be surprised, last year we took over 280 tons of materials that were either recycled, properly disposed of, and recycled. So and it's growing every year. The more people are trying to be more, thoughtful in what they're doing with the materials that they have.
County Administrator Gibbs.
So thank you, Kim, for the information, and we've been having a lot of good meetings on this. One thing I wanted to just clarify is right now it looks like our solid waste efforts are funded by the fees that we receive from the landfills. And so if we were to do this, would we need to increase those fees in order to fund it? And if so, by how much?
So I think you might be alluding, we're also working on an amendment process that'll adjust some of the funding on this. I work really well with the landfills and stuff with them. So we are working together about funding and stuff, but at this time, everything will be still funded through that.
Commissioner Moss.
A couple quick questions. What would be the approximate annual cost of the county to operate this facility? So it'd be the county operating it, right?
My program is funded through the tipping fees.
Okay.
So the landfills cover like my cost and the program costs.
Okay.
So no county outside the landfill tipping fees, from my understanding.
Okay. And that all runs through the county, right? Are those general fund dollars? Or are they separate?
I'll let Karen answer that a little bit better.
The landfill tipping fund is a special revenue fund, so the 2% of revenues collected from the landfills support this program. The 2% is currently somewhere, I think, about $500,000. So on the last page, Kim outlines where we've talked about a projected cost to the county of being just under 200,000. So to answer the other question as well, it looks like it would be about, not quite half of that. So if we're collecting 2% now, it would cost some additional funding.
Okay, I guess one thing I'm aware of is that the county has been working on this amendment process for tipping fees for a significant period of time. Is that maybe over a year, couple years?
That's correct.
So we're possibly getting towards the end of that process.
We're getting to the
Maybe.
point in the process where the Board of Commissioners will be seeing it soon. For reference, the hearing date is this week, the 9th. And then the public hearing comment period ends on the 20th. And then Jacob Bonham and the rest of the committee for the solid waste, they meet on the 22nd. And then there's a 30-day period in which they can tweak based on public comment, and then depending on how things fall, goes to the Board of Commissioners.
I guess personally, I'd like to see that process completed first before we proceed with this. So I'd like to make a motion to push this to the next meeting.
I would second that.
So that go to a vote.
Well, don't we have discussion first?
We have discussion, please. Thank you. Commissioner Ebel actually was first, but do you want to still talk, or would you like?
Yes, I just wanted to, I guess maybe just to educate the public a little bit more. I know that there's other facilities, and so can you just give examples of, it says here, will provide all the same services as the current ESC. So can you give examples of household recycling, household hazard waste, electronic waste, examples so that?
Yes, so there's 4 centers throughout the county. Those centers are located in Grand Haven, Coopersville, Georgetown, Jenison area, as well as Holland. Each one of those sites, they all collect the same things. We collect electronic waste, which is anything with, electronics.
Okay.
Anything that doesn't count as electronic because of the values that we are able to put in our scrap metal bin. So anything with scrap, 40% or more can be scrap metal. We have used oil, antifreeze we collect. We have our residential recycling. The primary focus with that is not to take over curbside. It's for those who are in condos, apartments, and those who don't have access to it. As well as we do household hazardous waste. The best way to think of that is anything underneath the kitchen sink or in your garage that you don't know what to do with, probably can take to our center. We also, if we don't accept it for a site at whatever reason, we educate our public to where they can go or look into where they want to go with it at our centers. Every site of those 4 are manned. We also work with Riesling Co-op for a clean sweep site. So we take pesticides and fertilizers there. Clean Sweep is an MDART program that focuses on pesticides disposal. They cover the cost for us in a reimbursement way to make sure that those are properly disposed of. We also have a site at Autumn Hills Landfill that's unmanned. It's open during those hours that we also work with. And those are for strictly used oil, antifreeze, and household hazardous waste. We also take in things like fire extinguishers that are expired. Essentially, if you don't know what to do with it, we'll help you. And I will add with the grant, I'm not sure if it's okay to say, but this point is not to, this is just to be able to start to get that data collection for you. By accepting this grant, we're able to just start and talk and bring more information for you. If that helps any, it doesn't lock us into funding. And one of the things that we talked with Eagle about, that's not part of the grant, is that if for some reason we find that this is not a beneficiary program, it doesn't work for Ottawa County for whatever reason, whether it's cost or something else, we're not locked in and fully committed. So let's say we went on and got, the plans drawn up, we looked into the finances, to the point we're able to fully and say, oh, this is not what the county wants, it's not financially responsible for us, then we are not committed beyond that point. Let's say the plans were drawn up, they want $10,000, then it will cover their 8,000, we'll cover our 2. So I should have clarified that too.
Commissioner Curran?
Yes, I wanted to just make sure that if for some reason this is pushed out to the next meeting, is there any deadlines that we're going to miss or anything like that where it would prevent us from potentially getting this funding?
Not that I'm aware of. I've been talking to Eagle. They understand that there's a process within the government as well, because they are too. It just pushes back things and getting things going forward since this has already been pushed back a little bit. And the grant's taken a lot longer. I will add that the funds that this is coming from won't be available again next year because of Part 115's amendment that has been through the government. There's going to be switching to a materials management plan in the future. There's a lot I could talk to you on that yet, but it's not passed yet. I mean, it's passed, but it's not enacted. But the funds in the future that are being used for this won't be there.
Okay, so we'd need to get it done this year for sure.
Yes, to get it signed, yeah.
Okay.
All right, Commissioner Bonema?
Kim, I just want to tell you that it's not lost on me at all how much work you and your team have put into this grant. Grants don't write themselves. And, the benefit to the taxpayer is that this is coming from a grant. This is not coming from their right pocket national bank, right? But no, that you've been determined to bring this to us. This is a lot of money. You're worth your weight in gold when you do things like this. This is something that not every department is able to accomplish, and you have. So you and your team, I just wanted to applaud you guys for bringing this forward because we need more of this. This is fantastic.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Moss.
For the vote, I just want to mention there's been a significant amount of effort put into this amendment contract, a lot of discussion with legal. And so it would probably be good for the board to be able to finalize some of those discussions. I've been a part of some of them, and some of the items that are being worked on with the tipping fees, to my knowledge, are not settled. And if we're going to be adding additional expense into those tipping fees like that, I think we need to know what those tipping fees are going to be. And there has been a lot of debate back and forth on how that's going to be handled. There's already, I believe, not enough money from the tipping fees. Part of the problem here. That's why they're being looked at. And so I can't speak to all the details, but I know the tipping fees could go up significantly depending on the outcome of this amendment or a new contract. Those costs flow directly to the people who pay the tipping fees, which are the trash haulers, and then their customers. So there's a lot going on here. I'd really like to see that portion that's related to this handled first.
Commissioner Curran.
Are there any updates that our corporate counsel or Administrator Gibbs could provide on where we're at with the negotiations on these tipping fees and what kind of the plan is and where we're going?
Yes, as a Commissioner Moss shared that those are not finalized yet. So we are still in talks as far as what we're going to do for the tipping fees and what format those will take and how we're going to measure those. So that does have a pretty significant impact on this because this project would be funded by those tipping fees. So we'd want to have some numbers on what those will look like once they're finalized and what the structure for changing those going forward will look like as well. So I do think it could make sense to wait until we have more information on that. And things are wrapping up. The public comment period ends, I want to say March 20th. There's a hearing this Thursday on the 9th. So we'll know more. We've had some very good talks yesterday, as a matter of fact. So we're not looking at like waiting for 6 months or anything like that. It's a relatively shorter time frame. So I think it could be good to have some additional specificity on the numbers we'll be looking at so we can see the operating expenses, which is what and I think we do have some good baseline numbers here, but to continue to refine what the operating expenses would look like so we can know what the numbers are over the long term. So yeah, I think it would not be a bad idea to wait until that process moves forward a little bit further.
Am I allowed to add that by signing this grant, we could still spend no money, but it'll help us to be able to find some of the information that you guys request? We can spend $0 and still I just have to report to them that we spent $0. But it'll lock in the opportunity to be able to future spend this funds.
Could I speak to that?
Yes, Commissioner Moss.
I'd still say we should wait. Usually when you accept a grant, you move forward. To then say that you're not going to move forward after you've committed to it and plans are drawn up, things like that. It will be very easy it'll be difficult to say, oh, let's reverse that out. It's much easier to just pause for one meeting so we can hopefully get some resolution on the tipping fees before, we don't want to be in a rubber band type situation here back and forth. Like, oh, yes, we're going to do it. Oh, no, we're not going to do it. It'd be much easier to make that decision after we have all the information. And trying to say that we need to make this decision so we can get the information probably isn't, it's just not something that I'm in support of.
And
Commissioner Rode.
And I would just add that I think in doing that, that doesn't necessarily mean this would become a no. But I can see where we would need to look through numbers about, what fees are going to need to be charged where, because it's possible if we're losing tipping fees that then maybe we now need to charge more fees here to make it sustainable in an ongoing basis. So I personally would like to see more of those numbers flushed out so we know exactly what we are dealing with. I mean, again, I support this initiative, but I do think it's important to have the facts that we need so we know what it would look like. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I appreciate the discussion and your support and listening to all this. It was the fastest growing county and we kind of edged out Ingham County and are now number 7. What we're trying to prevent is increasing waste we don't want to add another landfill in Ottawa County, right? And you're all aware of that. So we do need to increase our sustainability centers in some way. Like it was pointed out, we don't have a space over in that northeast area, and it would be good for them to have access. And as Commissioner Rhodey insightfully pointed out, Grand Valley, when they change over years, there definitely is. They work hard to manage that. They'll keep the little refrigerators and the microwaves and some of the TVs and send them to places where, like the homeless shelters store and Goodwill stores and places like that. They even supplied us during COVID for people who didn't have a shelter, and we could give them refrigerators and things in partnership with Camp Geneva. So it's lots of, they're trying to be creative, but we want to look forward. So I think Kim has explained this tremendously well. She has a depth of knowledge and we appreciate her expertise. But this grant is designed to kind of be a two-phase. So the first phase, they understand that is to gather information. We don't really have someone here at the county who can do that work. So some of the numbers that you need, we kind of need the grant to pay for helping to collect that. They understand that the second phase will only go forward with the approval of the committee and this board. So there will be no further action on construction or development. But to get the agreement of partners and to get the numbers that you need, I think you're asking extremely good questions. They're very, very important. We need to know how this is going to be sustained. And it could be from fees to the services, but also through tipping fees. I believe our tipping fees have been very stable for a long, long time. And we're very low compared to other communities. We don't want to be the top in Michigan, but it's time to increase those to some degree. And that's yet to be worked out. But I would just, we will do what you decide, but I would just propose that we would be allowed to move into just the phase one data collection phase so that we can help you better make the next decision. But respectfully leave that decision to you.
Commissioner Moss.
The main numbers that I'm concerned about are not the numbers that are going to be in the first phase of the grant. The main numbers are related to the tipping fees themselves. And as it was stated, they have been stable for 30 years. And now there's going to be what looks like could be a significant increase in the fees. We're not talking about a small change here. We're talking about potentially a large change. And so with that level of unknown with how these tipping fees are going to work, where waste is going to be taken, if our fees suddenly increase by 200%, maybe waste will be taken out of Ottawa County. There's a lot going on in those discussions. And so that is the information that I would like to have available to the committee and the board first.
I can also add too that the fees it's a contractual agreement currently, so it'll stay at least 2% until this is all figured out. And the part of the change is that it's no longer funding just this program, it's a program as well as super fund information that's, funding type stuff. So the structure is kind of changed. I think wanting more information is great. I have a lot of it, that you want and stuff like that. And you are correct. The things are being figured out. I would just appreciate the grant to be signed so I can get some more of that data.
Commissioner
Be able to
Salzro.
help you.
Sure. Just a quick question. I'm not really part of the solid waste or those discussions. Is there concern that the tipping fees won't be enough? Because it seems like you're saying that the tipping fees are going to be increasing. I don't see the sticking point is. I'm sorry.
If I could answer that.
Commissioner Moss. Yeah.
Great question. We don't know. We don't know what exactly is going to happen with the tipping fees.
But they're not going down, I'm assuming.
No, and the landfills are very supportive and they're willing to talk with us. We have 2 landfills on the solid waste planning committee.
Okay. So I guess I'm not really grasping what the issue is here. If they're going up, we seem like we have enough revenue to cover. If they're stable, we have enough revenue to cover.
If I may interject here, my understanding, and please can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the sustainability for this recycling center is predicated on an increase in the tipping fees. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, part of it is that there's an increase. Now the method of which is what's, I think, believing to be more up in the air. So, but yes, essentially, from my understanding, it should cover it.
So it looks like Commissioner Zylstra, there is built into the assumptions here that we would be seeing an increase in the tipping fees in order to make this sustainable going forward. And I believe what Sheriff Moss is saying is that we might want to have a better idea of exactly what kind of increase that would be in order to make this sustainable so that we could use that as part of the decision-making process.
But under the current revenue assumptions, did any change to the tipping fees?
So
Go
Doug,
ahead.
you may recall the Southwest Ottawa landfill, the ongoing pumping and treating of that site. That was funded years ago. The board had set aside funding to maintain that site. So gosh, I don't know, 2 years back, Corporation Council suggested that we, as that funding was reduced, that funding, that one-time funding that had been identified was there was less, we were running out. And so this was looking at our solid waste management plan as a total, which includes both current operations and maintaining that site is where the additional cost comes in. So those being consolidated together has caused us to look at the whole funding mechanism for this initiative for the solid waste system planning
And so this
in
is
Ottawa County.
incidental to that concern. So
Yeah, so
Okay.
there's where it's really the addition of those ongoing support, which has caused this larger discussion, of which this grant is a small portion of that.
thank you, I appreciate that.
Commissioner Meadow? Just one question. So as we talk about this tipping fee, in any way would that be, as it is increased potentially, will that be passed on to the customer?
The answer is yes.
It also technically currently is too. Everyone that dumps anything in Ottawa County is paying for this program.
Sure. Thank you, Kim. Any further discussion?
There's one more piece to the puzzle. The process for how these tipping fees may get adjusted, while it's still, I think, going through some of the initial process, I believe could probably take months to finalize. Is that true? Because if there are changes made or amendments made, local units, townships, may need to approve these changes so that, I mean, we could be months out before we know what's going to happen. The changes technically could be not approved, I believe. So there's more here that we're kind of at the tail end of a very long planning strategy process that's come out of a lot of corporate council work. And so letting that process kind of wrap up and finish will give us some of the most important information that we need as a board to continue making decisions related to solid waste and things like that.
Commissioner Curran?
So just so I understand, Kim, you said that it's a two-phase process, right? And the first phase is just going to provide you with the funding to get additional details. And then there's another phase that then would take you if we decide to move forward. But by moving this forward, you can get that information. And then that'll also in tandem, it could potentially, we could figure out what's going on with the tipping fees and get those contracts nailed down and then kind of look at the big picture and move forward.
That's correct.
Okay.
Looking at our budget, how we budget, I don't anticipate any large expenses besides the getting information. So no building, no phase two, not even till fiscal year 2024.
And would there be any out-of-pocket funding for the county with a phase one if we approve this? Just, I want to make absolutely sure there's no out-of-pocket funding for the county should we move forward with this today, correct?
Not set out of the budget, no. I'm estimating, I can't I can't move forward with the grant to get any construction. I don't know how much it's gonna
Yeah.
cost to get a blueprint or to get a quote even
Okay.
from a builder of any sort until I have the approval, because with Eagle grants, you can't do any expenditures or any projecting expenditure work until you have the grant signed.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Evil?
Go ahead. I don't know if you're able to answer this or not, but I know we keep talking about the tipping fees and they might go up. And so can you give us examples of what the tipping fees are currently?
The tipping fees as in, so
Give
we
us
get
example.
2% of everything that goes through the revenue through the
Okay.
landfill for this program. I think Karen stated earlier, my program is roughly, they tend to be every year right around 500,000, give or take. So obviously more trash goes in, more revenue is generated. Less trash goes in, less it's done. So, but stays pretty consistent around 500,000.
Commissioner Miedema?
So, and I know that people have asked me, where can I take my washer and dryer and microwave and stuff? This would be a place, and then you would charge them to take them there, right?
Yep, some of the items that are too large for one person to handle.
Mhm.
So we can guide them to where they want to do, and having a site like this, for all we know, we can be able to do that. We can do some of those larger items that people want to dispose of properly.
Commissioner Miedema?
Just, I guess, new information that Commissioner Moss shared. I guess if it really is gonna take several months, I guess I'm more inclined to want to have the big picture all together. I guess if it was just gonna maybe be 1 month, we could come back and take a vote, but I guess to me, it makes sense, if we're just saying, go ahead with the first phase, and then we're continuing to figure out all the tipping fees and that, then we can actually look at the broad picture at a later date. So just wanting to state my opinion on that.
And if the grant is signed, I could give you big pictures. I could present you with where we are with the whole commissioner, as well as what this would do. And I'd be able to give you a larger impact of what that actually is, because I'd be able to have all the funding structures locked down for you as well. So you could see, and I could present you with both too. Or if you want me at another meeting to present on the amendment and where that process is, Jacob Bottom has been part of several of those meetings as well, and he could assist too in providing the information.
Just
Commissioner
one last
Sasser?
question. I think we talked about it briefly. It looks like the idea is that we'd extend this discussion. Is there kind of an end date where we need to apply for this? Is it a July, what is?
My current talks with Eagle is I discussed that this meeting is here and that I would have some more information at the end of this week.
Okay. Thank you.
And then I told them I went to the board. So technically I think it was end of next week.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Commissioner Rhodey?
So it sounds like so there's a hearing later this week, and then more happens in the next 2 weeks. Maybe Administrator Gibbs, do you feel like that information that may come in the short term will be substantive enough to help us make these decisions? Or do you feel like it won't really give us enough information anyways? What's your thought on that?
I do. By the end of this month, the public comment period will be closed. We would have a better idea of what way we're going to go in terms of setting the tipping fees and how much we'll be doing through the plan amendment versus contract or ordinances. Those are the big issues we're working through right now. We have another follow-up today on that. So I think by the end of the month, we should be able to have better numbers on the different scenarios we're looking at to see what the revenue looks like and whether or not it can fund the different scenarios for this project. So I do think we'll have more visibility. Now, to Allison's point is what Chair Moss said earlier, the plan amendment process, if we go down that path for setting the tipping fees, does require 2/3 of the local jurisdictions. And that's kind of a long process, which means that if we were to go to that path, the revenue doesn't come in for quite a while until that gets finalized. So we're still in the decision-making process on which way we'll go for how we're going to deal with the tipping fees, whether through an amendment or through some other vehicle. And that will have a big impact on when the revenue would come in. So we'll know a lot more on that by the end of this month, because the comment period on the plan amendment will be over, and we'll be ready to move things to the board. So
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Oh, Blake, are you wanting to speak?
If I can just help Kim, I reached out to our architect and engineering firm, Progressive AE, to give us a
Could you
budgetary
speak
quote.
into
Oh,
the-
sorry. To give us a budgetary quote for what the building and structure would kind of look like. They just recently designed the Kent County one. And we did receive a quote of $8,700 plus $200 expendables to get us to that biddable. Like that cost would include all the kind of that phase one preliminary. What does it need to do? How big of a classroom area? How big of a drive-through canopy type thing do we need to have to build the structure, so that you'd have those numbers for when you need them or you don't need them. Is so 9,000 for phase one from the building standpoint.
And would that be
Commissioner Curran.
grant, or would that be grant funds would cover that, or county funds would cover that?
I'll let Kim
say the
speak to
grant.
that.
80% would be covered by the grant funds and
Gotcha.
20% would be covered by Ottawa funds,
Gotcha.
which we would have in our budget this year to be able to do that.
Okay, thank you.
It's my understanding in working with Kim on this that there's multiple sites. So it's kind of a pick your best two sites, kind of give you the site overview, the civil work. So they'd be able to give us a kind of a ballpark budgetable cost, so that she could put that into that packet for you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioner Baumann?
Yeah, one final for me. I just I don't see the downside here because I think that this allows us to get the ball rolling in places where it needs to be rolling. But obviously, there's quite a few stopgap measures along the way through our own committee. And then also as it comes up to eventually the Board of Commissioners to determine how best to move forward, because by the time that takes place, we'll know the answers to these questions. It's really important that we have as much information as we possibly can to make informed decisions. I totally agree with that. And I value what Commissioner Moss is saying with that. I don't think that this forces our hand in any way to make those decisions in a negative impact way in the future, because we can change our model and what we're doing based on the results of those fees, the tipping fees, as they are determined down the road. So maybe if anybody has an idea of what the negatives are here, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, because I'm just not hearing that we're forcing our hand in any way to commit to a certain path at this time. We're just allowing this grant to take place so that we can start our process that could be modified later.
I'll add on that point too, that we don't have to spend the full $1 million. If we find that we can make this more cost effective, we don't have to spend that full amount. They always say ask for more. That way, if you do find out that things increase or things change, you're not stuck. So I did ask for the maximum amount so that we could have that wiggle room if possible. But if we don't spend it, we don't have to spend it all.
Commissioner Moss, did you have?
Sure, I guess I'll just wrap up and say, I think this is a timing issue. I think if we want to follow, get it, set a process in place that allows us to gather the information that is going to be critical to decision-making. We have an update probably by the end of the month. That's why I made the motion to postpone this to the next meeting, because then we'll have more information after this month. And you might ask yourself, how often does a board approve a grant for a new environmental sustainability center? Right now, at least to push it to the full board. That doesn't happen very often. So on two hands, one hand, you have it's kind of a great opportunity. I'd like more information before we do that. On the other hand, once you do that, how easy do you think it is to reverse? So why don't we wait? That's what I'm saying. hint, it's not easy to reverse.
I don't think it's a reversal situation. I think it's just a vote. We either voted up or down in phase two. I don't know that there's anything to reverse.
And-
Yeah, all
And to
agreements
not
go.
spend the money, correct? I mean, that would be what we decide to do is to not spend the money.
Yeah, everything through this project, you'll see multiple times, whether it's the land agreement with GVSU, with the building construction. I don't have the ability to approve those. That's on the committees. As well as I want your buy-in on this the whole time, because you guys are connected to everyone. I'm not. So with your guys' involvement, I hope to be able to do the best center possible.
Commissioner Moss, so your motion right now is to move action item 4 to the next Finance and Administration Committee meeting?
Correct.
Can we call the vote?
Yeah, we can call a vote. Go ahead, Rachel.
Okay. Mr. Bonema,
No.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
No.
Mr. Zylstra,
No.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes.
Motion passes.
And the only rationale, honestly, Kim, for me, is just I want more information. That's all. One meeting.
Yeah, if there's any additional information outside, whether Heather, if you can please provide that to me, I have it on the information, my contact, so that I can get all the information you guys want.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to action item number 5, which can be found on page 49 through 96 as support services for Avigilon Systems. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
to approve? Thank you.
Support.
And discussion. Discussion. All right. There we go. There's one.
Like, I'm not the resident expert on this one, but I'll do my best. The Avigilon services there. I think it was 2017-ish. The county embarked on a countywide camera upgrade, security camera type things. At the time, from my understanding, the proposal didn't include like server maintenance and upgrades and keeping us up to the most current version. And that's what this is to do, is to bring us up to that. We're 5 years in. I'm not an IT guy, so I don't know for certain, but servers, I think after about 5 years, appear to have some quirky things happening to them, as we're noticing. So that's what this is for.
Karen?
Just as a fiscal services purchasing work with IT, and we did a proposal, and this Night Watch is the highest rated. We received 2 proposals, and Night Watch is the highest rated. There really are not, as I understand it from talking to the IT director, a lot of companies that do this type of work. So with Avigilon to provide this service to the county. So generally we look for a few more than 2, but in this particular service, there were 2, and Night Watch was the selected vendor.
Discussion or questions? No? Hearing none?
If technology changes, are we able to change out our supplier, our vendor here with this 3-year contract?
It's my understanding that the Avigilon platform is a proprietary platform, hence the limited number of bidders to this. I would say yes. You could change out the software and the system behind it. I don't know what that would look like, but I would say that most everything's possible.
The contract allows, if things change, that we could make changes if the environment, warrants it. Or if we don't like the vendor if the vendor is not providing the service that they are hired to do.
Thank you.
And the vendor appeared to be local as well.
I believe they're out of Kalamazoo. The other fact to this night watch is they're the contractor that's doing the card access program update countywide. So we're currently, our cameras were through one company, card access was through another. So this unifies it so that you have one point to focus on for all your, it's not a, they did it, we did it. Whose problem is it?
Sure.
So
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any further questions? All right. So we'll go ahead and call to a vote, roll call vote for support services for Avigilon Systems to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a 3-year support agreement with Night Watch in support of Ottawa County's Avigilon system and surveillance video and door access.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to action item number 6, which is the Michigan Medical Marijuana Operations and Oversight Grant. The motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the Michigan Medical Marijuana Operation and Oversight Grant agreement with the Michigan Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. Laura, do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Support.
Support? Discussion? And that can be found on page 97.
Is there anybody present that can speak to this?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Amy Shealy with the Ottawa County Department of Public Health. I'd be happy to answer some questions.
Maybe you could just give a brief overview.
Yeah. kind of
Sure.
About the program.
So
and
we've
what-
been receiving this funding since about 2016, and it enables us to do some education in the community. Over the last couple of years, we've done a variety of different things with healthcare providers, with mental health providers, doing some cannabis education, particularly focused on pregnancy, cannabis use during pregnancy, and the harms and dangers of that. We hope to do a Lock It Up campaign this year, which we've done in the past, but really plan to expand it to include encouraging communities to lock up prescription medications, safely and properly dispose of them. And we'll also be providing gun locks and encouraging folks to lock up any cannabis that they have as well. So we're planning to do that. And working with the schools to do education within the schools. And then also in the proposal was some safe vape storage. So when the schools confiscate vapes, providing a safe storage for that. So really, it's a continuation of some of the work we've been doing along with some new initiatives. And we received a little more funding this year than we have in the past, which is why it's on the agenda today.
Excellent. I remember when this was passed in 2016 and seeing somebody smoking a doobie in their car as I was driving alongside of them. I'm like, wow, I'm not in, just in Wonderland anymore. I'm in Wonderland now. So any other discussion or question? Chairman Moss?
Looks like, well, I guess I just have a question. I'm just wondering if we want the Ottawa County Department of Public Health advertising that on billboards and social media that people need to lock up their guns and their drugs. And it's a lot of money buying lock bags and giving them, I assume, giving them out to people. I can see the billboards now. And I'm just wondering if that's, I mean, some of this doesn't seem like this is necessarily county work. I guess I'm a little confused at why we're allocating dollars towards it, like buying lock bags and things like that.
But can I just question? I guess.
Sorry, Commissioner Zylstra.
Commissioner Moss, when you say it's not county work, I mean, keeping marijuana locked up.
Wouldn't that be
Definitely
the-
seems like a public health situation. I mean, I know that, you know, marijuana may seem like, you know, it's one of the safer drugs, but addiction to marijuana, you know, can have serious consequences, and having youth exposed to that, you know, in the home is definitely something I think is in the public health atmosphere. So
Right, that work done in the home, is that the job of the county? Or is that the job of the people in the home?
well, I think that, you know, if you're a homeowner or a parent and you have the access to these lockup bags, I think that that's your initiative, right? I mean, the county is not going to come and, you know, drop off lock bags at each home or send them to each home. It's the parents' initiative to take that on themselves. So, I mean, it's kind of a public health is offering these, and parents, you know, have the freedom to pick that up if they wish. So no one's being forced to take the lock bags.
I have a question.
Commissioner Rhodey.
So with this grant, is this grant coming from Lara, from funds that come from medical marijuana producers? Is that what's going on here? Can you just maybe address that?
Yeah, hi, I'm Lisa Ugansky. I manage our health planning and promotion team at the health department. The funding actually comes from a percentage of the number of people in the county that have the Michigan medical marijuana cards
Okay.
each year. And so depending on how many have it and how many new applicants there are, that can change the amount of funding that we receive to do this work.
Okay. So just trying to wrap my brain around this. So then that's revenue coming from people who have the medical marijuana cards.
Correct.
And then the grant is allocated towards at least partially education to help counter marijuana usage, right? Recreational marijuana usage. Is that correct?
There's a lot of prevention message involved. So yeah, and to speak to the lock bags too for a second, with the legalization of marijuana for adults, I think there can be a lot of debate whether that's right or wrong, but I think pretty much everyone agrees that marijuana isn't good for kids. And so that's one huge message that we have, as well as another reason why we have the lock bags. We know that marijuana is in homes, and doing what we can to keep that away from youth and getting into the hands of kids that obviously don't need to be using it. But there's a multitude of prevention messages that we'll use and education that we'll provide. A lot of the focus will be, again, for education around pregnancy and the implications that can happen when women choose to use marijuana when they're pregnant.
Okay.
And the impacts on the developing child.
Okay.
Ms. Curran.
Thank you. So I just want to kind of tell a personal story about this. So we actually went to Petoskey. We brought our little beautiful wiener dog Scooter with us, and he found a wrapper. It was a cupcake wrapper. Turns out it was loaded. And the poor little guy got high. And, it was interesting when we called the vet, because my husband was very worried about him. And we called the vet, and they said that ever since the legalization of marijuana in the state, they see it 3 times a week. Like, it's very regular. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, if the kids or if dogs are getting into this, imagine what the kids are doing. And that was definitely concerning to me. I remember this was like a year and a half ago. I remember thinking that then. So
yeah. And as Amy mentioned, this is a continuation of a project that we have done in the past in terms of the lock bags. And I can say that they fly off the shelves. People are always interested in having them. Again, it's not just about marijuana. It's about prescription drugs that people might have in their home and keeping them safe from others that are in their home.
How do you distribute the lock bags?
We have a lot of partners in the community. I know we have had them available at the health department. Do you know specific places?
Lock bags. Yeah. So in moving forward, we hope to have some new community partners with those. So for one good example I can think of, I work with the Suicide Prevention Coalition. And so when in schools, when the school counselors are dealing with a student who's expressed suicidal thoughts, one of the things they do is talk with the parents, kind of come up with a safety plan. One of the things we hope to do is provide them with a lock bag to say, make sure that your lethal lethal means are secure, you know where they are and that they're safe. So that's one example, but I would say really community partners in general around the community are who we hope to partner with.
Even health systems by chance?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yep, definitely. On our Suicide Prevention Coalition, we have the health systems represented and they've been really eager to partner with
Grateful,
us
yeah.
too. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? All right, we'll go to vote.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
No.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, action item number 7 is Parks and Recreation Personnel Request. And the motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the request from Ottawa County Parks Department to reclassify the head naturalist, park naturalist, and nature center secretary positions and add 1 FTE communications specialist position at a cost of $95,180.34 funded by the Parks Fund balance for the fiscal year of 2023. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a support?
Second.
All right. And discussion. There he is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So before you, you have a request for some realignment of our staffing and reclassifications. So essentially, we've been having a conversation about staffing for some time. This action request was actually triggered when our head naturalist resigned, I think in November. So we looked at realigning to the full-time jobs so that they would be on the same pay scale, as well as our secretary position that we have at our Nature Education Center, and then filling a vacant position that we've had on the books, the communication specialist.
Is there discussion? Commissioner Moss.
Just a comment that even though it says it's not included in the budget, it also says it's funded by the parks fund balance for this fiscal year. So I just wanted to highlight that.
So we've aligned, we've had it was head naturalist and then a naturalist. So we're making 2 program supervisors, one who will be focused on private programs as well as our outdoor education programs that we're focusing on rolling out to our schools. And then the other would work on our public programming as well.
So what I'm hearing is that the job actually itself has changed. There's more responsibility. And so you're trying to advance the pay grade to meet the new responsibilities.
Correct. So for the naturalist, it would be moving it up to an unclassified position, pay grade 9. The head naturalist actually already is unclassified, so it would stay the same. We're just changing the title and tweaking the job description. And then we have several administrative support staff in our department. So the Nature Education Center secretary is inconsistent with some of the other admin in our staff or our department. So it'd be moving it up to make it consistent. And then backfilling a position that we've had on the books for some time. So.
Thank you. Any further discussion? And go to a vote or a roll call.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you. All right, moving on to action item 8, strategic impact personnel request. To approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners, a proposal from Strategic Impact to change 1.0 FTE full-time benefited senior secretary group T position at a universal pay grade 4 to an administrative assistant unclassified at a universal pay grade 7 for a total cost of $6,225. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support?
Second.
In discussion? Here comes Paul. And page 126.
Good. Hello, Chair Cosby, Commissioners. Good morning. Thank you for considering this request. I'll start by saying that I'm grateful for the support that our department has received to do the work that we do for the county. And over the last several years, there have been added responsibilities, and put a few examples in that job description with administering the Housing Commission, Groundwater Board, the J.H. Campbell Power Plant. There's some additional duties that our administrative support assistant has been doing. And that position is obviously incredibly valuable to support, scheduling and calendars and all those administrative functions that have started to elevate over the last few years. And this request is to appropriately align that position with a pay grade for an administrative assistant position that does comparable work in other departments, but to support it for us. And it says the funding is not in the budget currently, but we do have budget excess for this fiscal year 23 to cover that cost for this year.
I need to say,
Yeah,
Commissioner Zalstra.
thank you very much.
Mhm.
I've been on the planning commission since maybe 2010, 2011, when it was still the planning commission. Been on the housing commission. The senior secretary for 6,225 is the best 6,225 that we're going to spend. Pam is an exemplary employee. I cannot tell you, being a member of the housing commission, the work that she's done, and the planning commission. I've always appreciated her work, and I heartily endorse this motion.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and go to a vote.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra.
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. All right, moving on to action item 9, and that is resolution to authorize qualifying statements and quotes for bonding purposes. The motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the resolution to authorize certification of qualifying statement for bonding purposes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support? Anybody?
Support.
Thank you. All right, discussion. Hi, Karen.
No. This is an annual filing with the state of Michigan. It goes through a number of questions, all of which sound completely horrible, that they want to confirm that, we are not under court order or judgment to levy a tax to pay our bonds, or that that our financial statements, we do not have any deficits, that we are not transferring tax. There's just a number of questions that they go through to validate that a municipality is okay to bond. So we file it annually. You must file your financial statement with the state of Michigan 6 months after your year end. This falls in, and we file this immediately after we file our statements. And then if at any point during the year we did want to issue bonds or refund bonds, this statement would need to be on file. So we do it just as a natural course of business every year when we file our financial statements. And it's really just a housekeeping item, really, to get that approval to file that statement. If there was anything of, if we ever had to answer one of these awful questions as yes, I think you would hear about it in other formats.
So we have the the blessing to be of financial good health here in Ottawa County. Yes. So wonderful. Anybody have any questions of Karen? All right, I'll let Mr. Zalster go back to his seat. Well, you're welcome. Thank you, Karen. Roll call vote.
Okay, Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Action item 10 is fiscal year 2023 budget adjustments. There is also an A per A to this. So to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners, the 2023 budget adjustments per the attached schedule. That looks like it starts on 132.
So moved.
Support.
Discussion?
Do we maybe want to address the Enviro Clean
Yeah,
Services
is
before
our
we?
friend Blake. Yes.
Now I get to speak about something that's my department. So since I've got here, the housekeeping services countywide have been a little bit underperforming from our contractors. When we switched our custodial supervisor due to a retirement, we found out that we were working out of contract with the vendors we had. When we tried to enforce standards that we found in old contracts, we were given 2 weeks notice by one vendor and they left. So we scrambled. We found EnviroClean was able to step up to the plate and provide us with enough staff on a temporary basis to get that while we did RFP. And before you is the information of the RFP and a lot of things we looked at. EnviroClean is local. They're right out of Holland, Michigan. They've been great with providing plenty of staff, which is something that we always struggled with other vendors in the past. It's not a perfect scenario, but we struggle getting contractors who can pass background checks to clean in, because to go into a courthouse or a sheriff's office branch, you have to pass a very rigorous FBI clearance to clean in those things. So they were able to provide us 20 plus employees in about a week's notice that we started going through. Some passed, some did not. They provided us with more. So it's really been great working with EnviroClean. If you look at a lot of the data there, the industry standard is right now somewhere between, it's kind of wide, 7 to 14, 15 cents a square foot for cleaning throughout kind of the nation as a generalization. EnviroClean came in when we break it down 11 cents a square foot. So they're right on par with everything else. When you look at obviously the contract is for more than what we used to pay yearly between the two that we dealt with. It's because we're getting a better service. We were not getting great service out of the two vendors that we had. The hope going forward is this budget adjustment gets us to October 1st. We can then budget for 24's budget and out. But in the meantime, I'd like to, I've spoke with Administrator Gibbs on it and Deputy Administrator Waterman on it. Some cost reduction measures. What can we do internally to help bring these costs down for the contract moving forward on a permanent basis?
So change your menu items, basically, kind of reduce the number and see what you can do internally.
There's some that probably won't be wildly popular, but we'll put them out there.
Any questions? Commissioner Moss?
I believe this is a separate motion. So we should handle probably 10 and then go to this one, at least for voting.
This is 10A.
10A, yes. Yep. All right. Do we have any
Jill.
questions since we have Blake here for 10A?
Did you? I was just
You're
going
right.
to say, Joe, my thought on that was that we should maybe address this first rather than vote on the entire package, which this is part of.
So we're currently in 10 suggested motion to approve and forward the budget adjustments. So I guess I'm confused.
And this is one of them.
Because it's mid-year. and
It
he's
looks like it's a
mentioned-
separate action request, which needs a separate motion.
Do we need a
Am I
separate motion?
misunderstanding?
No, you're correct. So maybe we need a separate motion. I was just thinking we should address this one prior to address like approving everything of which this is a part.
Thank you. Yeah.
Because it's a budget adjustment.
Yes. So I can make a motion that I can make a motion then to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners for approval, the Enviro Clean Services contract for housekeeping services.
Support.
Do we already have a motion on the table? For 10?
We
We're
do,
taking it as 10A. Yeah.
we do we need to withdraw that prior motion?
I think
Let's
that
withdraw
Right.
that prior
Fix it.
motion.
That's the
Yeah.
ticket.
Okay.
Okay.
Who
But
made
I
the
think I
motion? Who made the
technically
motion?
made it, so I'd like to withdraw it then.
Okay,
All right.
okay, all right, yay.
I withdraw my support.
Thank you.
So we're going, so we're going
So
to,
You want me to make it again?
Yep.
yes,
Okay.
please.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So I motion to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners for approval, the Enviro Clean Services contract for housekeeping services at the James Street Complex, Grand Haven Courthouse, Holland District Courthouse, and Fulton Street Building.
Support.
All right. And then we've had discussion. Do we
I-
want further discussion or we want?
I have a couple questions. So,
Commissioner Miedema.
yes, so thanks for being here today again, Blake.
No problem.
I can see the absolute need and why you presented it to us. I guess I have a couple questions because it is a large financial cost.
Mhm.
I'm not seeing a recommended funding source. I guess I'm just wondering if it didn't get approved today, is there any possibility of using other custodial staff in the meantime? Are there other solutions before October 1 that are less costly? I guess those are a couple of my questions.
Karen will be able to speak to the financial side of that. From an in-house standpoint, I'd love to be able to take it over. We have 5 custodians now. We will be losing one for 12 weeks coming up directly. When you look at the square feet of the number of buildings there, to clean them, it's just I've went through this game in my head quite a bit, trying to figure out how do we do this? And I just can't get enough hours with people's vacations and everything else to make this successful. But from a funding standpoint, I think Karen's got a ton of success.
Okay. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Blake. So there is a budget adjustment on the budget adjustments. It's the very last one to fund this contract. So when we did go out, we did find that this was a more expensive option than when we had planned when we did the budget. The additional funding will be paid. So Blake takes care of all the buildings. We allocate those costs because in many situations we have grants or other funding available to help support the operation. So we allocate those costs out. So that's why you see that in some cases on that budget adjustment, there is other funding, about $80,000 of other funding available to help support this increase. And then the areas of the buildings that we maintain that there is no other funding that is coming from the general fund contingency to help support that, the operation and maintaining the facilities. I would just mention, and Blake can confirm, but when the contractor gave notice and left and we look for a situation to maintain the facilities, that emergency stopgap was more expensive than this contract. So we were actually very anxious to get this on this agenda because we built everything around getting this contract in place so we could have something sustainable to maintain the facilities at less than we're paying right now.
Because if you hire additional staff, there's a cost. If you were to have your own custodial services in-house, there's additional costs associated with that as well.
Mhm.
So you have $80,000, I heard, in the budget.
$80,000 from the from other sources, like community mental health has their own funding source. The friend of the court operations has their own funding. So we bill where we can bill those grants. We bill them rent for the facilities that they're using. And then it was $112,000 from the general fund contingency, which we set up when we adopt the budget annually to help manage through situations such as this that come up throughout the year.
Is that part of their indirect budget?
It's not a part of indirect budget. We track actual costs for the facility
Okay,
and we bill them rent.
okay. And did you have a cost down here? Just curiosity to give it an idea, because you say you have 4 employees right now, 1 going out, so it's 5, sorry, and 1 going out for 12 weeks. What's the average cost of an employee for a custodial position?
Full-time custodial position would cost
Just
us
approximately.
$64,757.12.
And is that benefited? Okay,
That's a full-time benefit. We have 5 full-time benefited custodians. To speak to Karen's point about getting in contract versus out of contract, it would save us about $7,000 a month.
thank you. Are there additional questions? All right.
I just
Go
have
ahead,
one
I'm sorry.
question.
Yes,
Um,
Commissioner Brody.
So, maybe this isn't possible if you already have a contract kind of negotiated, but would it be possible to reduce some of the services now and not wait until October to reduce some of this cost?
We may be able to do that. Our bills are trending currently less than. We just don't have a good data pool to pull from
Okay.
on that. There are things getting them, how would I say, implemented? That would be a word. May be difficult because they may not be appealing
Okay.
to 1,200 staff.
No bad
I'm all
feelings.
for it. We'll be throwing these out there, but I would like to kind of work with administration and maybe kind of help ease these
Have more
out
time?
for that October 1st deadline, soften that blow just a little bit.
Okay.
Are there other questions? No. Can we bring action item 10A to a vote?
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes,
motion passes.
Thank you, everyone.
thank you. So we're going back to 10. So, all right. Action item 10, fiscal year 2023 budget adjustments. I have a motion to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the 2023 budget adjustments per the attached schedule.
I'll make that motion.
I'll support it as well.
Okay. All right, discussion? Seeing no discussion. All right, Rachel, can we go ahead and call? a vote?
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
motion passes.
Yay, we're through the action items. All right, moving on to committee reports. I have Amanda here for the treasurer and financial month end update.
Just make sure, I'm so soft spoken that I want to make sure you can hear me. Just want to let you know, as you recall from last month's finance committee meeting, the treasurer's finance committee report is an informational report that you will receive each month. You will note that the report you're receiving today is through the end of January. And Ms. Cosby and I had discussions about the new schedule that you have, because it's the first Tuesday of the month. It is not possible for me to run the data that I need to compile this report and get it to the executive secretary so that it's in your board packet. So we're going a 1 month delay on this. So just, that's why you're seeing this information like this. Again, last month, we talked about the charts that are in the report. I made them larger, which is, I'm sure, beneficial to me and all of you. I wanted to highlight a couple of things from that are kind of ancillary to this. You will, at the end of the report, you get a copy of the OPEB report, which is the retiree health plan.
Yeah.
It's been prepared, and our investment advisor for several years has been Greenleaf Trust. And we are now transitioning from Greenleaf Trust to Cap Trust, and that's a result of a RFP that we conducted last fall put the RFP out to a number of investment advisors. I think we received 7 responses. We interviewed several of them and made that decision. Director Karazinski and Verbeek were involved in that decision. We are now transitioning over to Cap Trust. And so that's taking a little bit of time because assets need to be moved. You've got to set up systems within the new firm. So that's what we're doing. Likely next month, you will see a report from Cap Trust, which will look different than the one you have now. Secondly, on the sheet that I handed out to you, you'll notice at the bottom of the sheet, there's a line that says foreclosure. And there's a little chart below that. It's probably on your table right in front of you. I think I handed it all out to you a little bit earlier. Just to give you a sense of, does everybody have that? Okay, just to give you a sense. So at the very top of that chart, you'll see for tax year 2020. Just want to give you a sense of what we're going through in the foreclosure process in my office. So at the beginning of the forfeiture process, there were 341 properties that were forfeited. That's in their second year of foreclosure. By January 1 of this year, we had 125 properties that were in forfeiture. So that tells you that number of folks have come in and paid off their taxes since the forfeitures first took place. Since January 1, since February or March 1, the difference between January 1 and March 1, it's 89 properties still. So by the end of this month, that will be telling us tell us how many more properties we're going to foreclose on. The 89 figure consists of 9 buildings, 54 houses or condos, 26 vacant pieces of property, 6 gap parcels, and 5 landlocked parcels. And you can see the trend over the last few years, especially since COVID. We had a large effort, not only in our county, but statewide, to try not to foreclose on folks during COVID because of limited work hours, just a lot of factors. So I would suspect we're going to be very close to, the similar numbers that we've had in the past. Please know that I, again, and my staff work vigilantly to identify folks that are at that point of being foreclosed on. And if they work with us, come up with a payment plan, we will work with them, and so that they're paying down their taxes from prior years. That the goal, again, I think I shared with you when I gave my annual report, the goal for us is never to foreclose on someone, but work with them to get their taxes paid in full. So other than that, are there any questions for me?
So when you say similar numbers, are you talking about the numbers since COVID, basically? So in the 300 and low 400 range, or you?
I think, I'm sorry, the numbers on the right-hand column, the amount foreclosed, that's the number I'm looking at.
Okay, sorry.
We would probably,
But
if I had to guess, 10 to 12 properties. But, 6 of those are gap parcels, which means when a GPS has laid over all the land and we can find a owner, or we can't find an owner, those gap parcels will be sold. If we can't find sellers, they go on, and there's just a sale process that goes through. And if finally we can't ever find somebody to buy it, it comes back to the land bank. And so that's That's how, at least in our county, some of the property gets into our land bank.
Interesting.
So I think 10 to 12, that's
10
my
to
guess
12.
right now.
Well, it looks like it's trending in the right direction.
Yeah, I hope so. And one other thing you should know, last year, the state through federal ARPA funds did establish something called the Michigan Housing Assistance Fund. So I believe it was about $240 million went into that fund, intended to help people who were affected by COVID with not only property taxes, homeowners association fees, utilities, anybody who was affected by COVID, loss of work, loss of hours, anything. They can apply to this fund and have past taxes paid, past utility bills paid. So we have been referring a lot of folks to that program and have had a great number of payments made for their taxes. So
How long does that last for?
it's a one-time payment. So they'll get the total amount paid, the total amount due to us or due to the utility company, and that fund will pay that in full.
So until funds run out?
Oh, I see what
Is
you're
that
saying.
not-
Yes.
no, I did
Yeah.
ask a while.
Yeah, that
Just
would
thinking
be.
for our constituents in the event that we do run into this particular concern, it'd be a
Mhm.
great place to refer them to.
Yep. Any questions?
Okay, best of
Thank
luck.
you.
Thank you, Amanda. All right, committee report ARPA. We used to have this placed back on the agenda to review. We want to know remaining funds. So that is page 161. Open it up to discussion. Now, Paul Sachs did want to talk about 5G, right? No, yeah, 5G or broadband.
Thank you, Chair Cosby. Don't want to interject too much on what your intentions were with this discussion. So I can either talk broadband now or see what other items might.
Maybe go
Commission.
broadband and then we can kind of
Okay.
go from there.
All right, very good. Thank you. Thanks for pulling that up too. Yeah, oh, clicker, good deal. We get that back up. Where'd it go? Thank you. Okay, as I've mentioned, there's a lot of activity happening in this space right now, and there is this deadline next Tuesday, March 14th, for the state Robin grant funding. That is funds, it's about $250 million that the state received from the capital improvements program that they funneled to help support broadband and middle mile work they called out as well. As each of you, I'm sure, realize and have fielded emails from providers that are reaching out during this kind of last minute period saying, we'd like some letters of support. We want to submit a broadband application to get Robin funding. It will be incredibly competitive with this Robin grant. We're getting into this interesting crunch time now, but moving backwards, we have been diligently working to find the right way to address these gaps in coverage. And I may have communicated this to some of you, if not all of you, that over the last several decades, there have been tens of millions of dollars that have become available for broadband. And those funds go to ISPs. And we're still in the situation we are today with gaps in access. I believe we need to think about a new way to address this for our residents, for our businesses, small businesses, for healthcare, for education. When we think about our infrastructure, we've got to do this right. It's a very unique opportunity and tremendous timing for us to do it, especially when we think of the ARPA funding that's available, where there's that allocated reserve of $7.5 million. Let me see if I can get this slide to advance. Nope. There we
Mind
go.
if I ask
Thank
one
you.
question. What is an ISP?
Internet service provider.
Okay.
Private sector business. Yep, good question. Interject at any point with questions. I literally threw this together really quick this morning, a few slides, and maybe 5 of them. And they are from a presentation of about 70 slides, which strategically, I want to bring that to you here coming up soon to talk through where we're at. But in light of the timing with this March 14th grant deadline, I want to highlight a few of these items to help connect the dots, if you will, on where we're at. So if you look here, the map to the right is the FCC breakdown, and it shows the vast majority of Ottawa County has coverage for high-speed internet at 25 download and 3 meg upload speeds. That's very low broadband speeds right now. The FCC actually has to change that definition, considering all the use of data activity going through those infrastructure channels. Biggest problem over the last several decades on how this funding has not helped our gaps in access is those maps by the FCC are flawed. They are wrong. This is known all the way across the United States. Very challenging process to get those maps right. And we're still working on the avenues to do that. Had a meeting with the FCC chair staff just last week to try and dial this in further on how we get it right. But going back to the left side of the map, we did our own analysis with the best data that we could, partner with Merit Network, to get a better understanding across Ottawa County of what our gaps in access are. Fairly challenging process because a lot of the information on where broadband is and isn't is difficult to pin down now. That has to get better for us to know where we need to go into the future. But this was completed, this merit analysis, gosh, time goes so fast, probably a year and a half ago, not 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago now. And it shows, okay, we do have challenges that are not represented by the FCC. We've got to use this data to encourage the funding streams becoming available to get those underserved areas. I think next slide. Ooh, went too far. Also, this is 120 download, 20 upload broadband speeds. This is where we're trying to push the FCC to make that the standard definition of broadband. But again, the map to the right, FCC shows that, yeah, you know, everyone across the county in those areas, you have access to 120 speeds. The merit data that we've pulled together counters that. And that lines up with a lot of the anecdotal information that we're hearing for residents. I'm guessing you have all heard some of those comments. We hear these comments, something to address. And you've seen this data before as well. You know, we've got just over 10% of our households don't have any access to that 25/3 speed. Very serious concern. If you look overall, nearly 30,000 households don't have access to good, reliable 120 speeds. That is something to address. Now, we did, you know, again, systematically, we said, how do we do this right? We released a request for information to broadband providers last August. And we laid this out and said, these are our gaps in access. We're looking for a providers to help collaborate with us and build a solution that addresses broadband across the board for the county. We're pretty much done and tired with the one-off projects, with public tax dollars funding certain areas. That's what we might fall into if we don't partner with the right provider with these funds coming to us now. And that's why we did that RFI, so we could see who's interested. What can we learn from the providers that would want to align with our objectives and goals to build the right infrastructure for our residents and our businesses. There are several of those providers that have reached out recently, and I know they have reached out direct to you. They have not engaged with the county to understand what we want to do and how we want to use the funding, potentially our contribution, and how we leverage those state dollars to make this happen. This map here is from the Robin Grant portal itself through the state of Michigan. And it shows those areas, those dots, blue and green, that are unserved and underserved that are eligible for Robin Grant funding. This is we're continuing to refine our understanding of broadband access gaps across the county, locally, at the state level, and nationally. But right now, the grant funding for Robin says, okay, these are the areas of the county that are eligible for funding if you can figure out the right way to do it. I wanted to include the slide for one, it's very helpful to see our areas of eligibility. And to that point, it's really important to look at that distribution is across the entirety of our county. That's going to take a new way of thinking about this to address it right. And I remain very confident that we can do this. And I have trust in our consultants that have supported the county and our office with this work. Doug Weber with Urban Wireless Solutions has been tremendous. And he and his colleagues have been supporting us for the last 3 years to try and navigate this space. It is unfortunate, right? We got this grant timing stuff again, but this is kind of the situation we're in with this deadline by March 14th. But when we look at these areas of need, what does that solution look like? And here's an example. So that gray bar Fujitsu study that the ARPA funding helped us get done. They analyzed a tremendous amount of data and put this together. And it's the blue line in particular that I want you to look at. That's what's this conceptual middle mile network design. It looks at all of those areas of need. It considers existing infrastructure and it looks at urban and rural areas. How do we build a middle mile network that is open access? Meaning that it's the backhaul for connectivity. It's the main infrastructure line that will exist, and then to deliver last mile actual service to residents, it will spur off of that system. It's open access, meaning there's lots of fiber strands in there. Providers have the ability then to lease dark fiber from that infrastructure and then deliver it as a service to residents. Again, it is not not sure where that went, but it is not our goal at all to be involved in internet distribution and service, right? That's not the role of county government, in my opinion. So it's the ISPs that will deliver last mile service. And a big part of the challenge that we're faced now with getting service to everyone is the cost of delivering that service. And in particular, if you think about the rural areas, it is obviously costly to build that infrastructure to low densely populated areas. When we build the right, well-designed middle mile network, that creates a stronger business case for the right internet service providers to say, okay, rather than us going and installing the backhaul, and you look at the way that traditionally internet is delivered, right? For instance, it's multiple roads. It's a road for one trucking company, a road for another company, and another road for another company. There's an opportunity to build one road that everyone can use and share, right? And call it a toll on that road, and then you deliver the service. So that's what the middle mile network design is about that we're looking at.
Aren't there plans for 94 to potentially become a tollway for this purpose?
Oh, well, yeah, that's actual highway, transportation highway. That was an analogy thinking about the fiber internet infrastructure in that way. So with this network design, we have a request for proposals that went out several weeks ago. Those are due today at 2:00. I am confident, based on our RFI process, the providers that came forward, what we've learned and gleaned through meetings and conversations, and I've been working as I can through everything else to try to keep Joe, for example, up to date on some of those discussions. I'm expecting a good proposal, one that really makes sense for us this afternoon to move on, and a provider that is willing to come in and design, construct, own, and maintain that entire middle mile network. And it'll be fully open access. So they also are an ISP, so they build the middle mile network, but then they are experienced in delivering and managing the logistics of an open access network where other carriers can utilize dark fiber to extend service. Tremendous value there. So we're not giving funding to one ISP to deliver service. We're creating a system that allows for competition, allows for choices for residents and business owners, can improve customer service, and that competition can ultimately help to lower cost for our residents when there are more options available. This particular network design, we're anticipating it with the provider that I'm anticipating will be responding to utilize some existing infrastructure. Even with the Holland Board of Public Works has fiber. We're having conversations with the Ottawa Area Intermediate School District. They see tremendous value in utilizing this network, this middle mile design for their educational connections, and offer continuously advancing their services to residents in need through their particular avenues. Chair Cosby and I also briefly touched on electric vehicle infrastructure, right? So when some of this is built along highway corridors, there are certainly opportunities to use that type of system to support the connectivity needs of infrastructure. Talking with some of our consultants about body cam work, depending on technology that's selected, this type of infrastructure can be used for so many applications for data distribution, not just for internet service delivery. So there's a tremendous value here. Some of the estimates that I believe we're going to come in line with when I think about this design, it'll be about 383 miles, middle mile network. Cost is about $26 million. We'd be looking for the county to contribute that $7.5 million in ARPA fundings. And then, so we're leveraging $3.5, nearly $4, right, from that contribution that we put into this.
Can
Then
you tell me
there's
the cost again?
about
total cost.
26 million is what I'm anticipating this network design will be.
And from the there was bipartisan infrastructure law, there is an awful lot of opportunity for broadband. As far as funding is concerned.
Yes,
And
correct. So this is a timing one as well. So
Right,
Robin
Robin.
is the first release
Mhm.
that the state has. Again, due next Tuesday, those applications. There will be, what is it, 1.3 billion, I believe, from the Infrastructure and Jobs Investment Act. The state is still working to determine how it will create its grant eligibility criteria, and that would be called BEAD funding. So I'm staying engaged with that just to make sure that we are positioned well for this type of design to get that funding. I'm expecting at this point for the state to release those criteria. The way conversations are going with the NTIA and the FCC, I'm thinking it'll probably be early 2024 when that additional funding comes out. But if we can pull this together in the right way by Tuesday, and considering the timing of need that we have across this county to do this, if we can pull it together now and do a partnership with the right ISP, I think we have a very strong opportunity to have a very competitive grant for that 250 million coming up on Tuesday. Where I would be at with some of my quick thoughts coming together here on considering timing is when those proposals come due, we'll obviously interview the candidates, access the information. Our RFI process has been very valuable because we've learned a lot about where this is at. When those numbers come together and it makes sense, we have some conversations here later in the week. It would be something like, if this resonates well with this finance committee and with the board of commissioners as a whole, to have a letter of intent with the partner, the ISP selected partner, to include with the grant application for next Tuesday. And that letter of intent would say something to the effect of, we're intending to contribute the $7.5 million in ARPA funding towards this project, contingent upon actual receipt of the grant award and execution of a formal contract. So there'd be a contingency with it, but for the timing element to pull that together.
County Administrator Gibbs.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul, for the detailed information. I think it's very interesting. I wanted to bring up a comment that was shared from IT yesterday, in which he felt that the design we're looking at here creates a single point of failure. I wanted to see your thoughts on that, and that's something we need to dive into further and look at alternate designs.
Yes, thank you for that. So I did reconnect, and I told Paul Klimas at that meeting, like, that is not lost on us on creating that right to not have a single point of failure. When we think about IT, they don't like to use the word redundancy necessarily, it's resiliency. This would be looked at a resilient design. And after that comment was made, I connected with the assistant superintendent of the Ottawa Area Intermediate School District. He is providing a letter of support from the district itself that speaks to this plan and speaks to its role in supporting the educational needs and to accommodate resiliency and a network design. This was mentioned at the meeting too, that this comment was made. You know, the ISD, it's known that we'll have to look at upgrading their infrastructure that exists already. And so this type of system kind of ties into the timing and adds strong value for them and helps to avoid comments that were made like that. And those are good points of consideration to think through. And the good thing about this as well, I'm not a technical expert, but when comments are made like that, I can mildly speak to it because we've been so diligent on this path to figure out the right way to address this problem that just shouldn't be the case in this day and age for our residents to not have access.
Any questions?
Administrator Gibbs, if you could speak to, many places I travel in the world where fiber is very expensive and they don't want to dig up the earth to do it all. They just put up some towers. And that gives that broadcast internet to that entire village community and beyond. Why are we spending all the money to put this all on the ground like this?
Yeah. Very good question, Commissioner Bonema. There's another added element, part of that 70-page slide presentation. Each tower has to have backhaul. It has to have fiber backhaul to run to it. So regardless, we'll have to have that in play. We have an RFP out right now as well for a tower contractor to come in. And when we look at the northern part of the county on the north side of the Grand River, our more rural areas, we're looking at the cost effectiveness of fixed wireless communications in those areas because fiber distribution and bearing cable right in those more rural areas might not make economic sense. Mm-hmm. So there's a staged approach to this that we're looking at. Current need, build the backhaul, The tower provider would partner with a fiber backhaul middle mile person. And we're currently looking at strategic locations to place towers as needed for fixed wireless.
That's the
Please.
EV grid though, too, the electric grid. Now granted, I am not technologically savvy either, but I remember from NACO when we were there, they want to parallel these two processes together, the build out of our grid, which will be above ground, not under, with broadband as well.
Yes, and that the equipment that from our understand, because we're starting to dive into EV infrastructure more, it can utilize, depending on your connectivity, the fixed connection for fiber and the wireless connectivity for those infrastructure charging stations. So multiple overlapping benefits. I'll also add, when we think about the wireless tower construction cost, ongoing maintenance, and what goes into that, I am looking for a provider, and I believe we will make this happen, of a company that will do all those costs, no cost to the county, and a potential revenue share even with us. Because they see the need to make this connectivity work, and they see the value of the public-private partnership, which elevates the grant application status also in this place. Hopefully that helps.
And that's a way that we can recoup some of this $7.5 million that's being proposed, is a revenue share.
You're exactly right. Yes.
Sorry to keep speaking.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to stop out of my place. I know this is a decision of the board to decide how we go forward here. I think it is definitely worth looking at broadband. I'm a little bit concerned about the deadline and the very tight timeframe. I think there are some questions that I would like to ask or have some discussions on regarding the specific plan before, did you say next Tuesday?
14.
The
14th.
That's the grant deadline. The proposals will be this afternoon at 2 p.m.
Right. And so considering that there will be other grants, the 1.3 billion later this year, that is something that could be looked at, even if for some reason we weren't able to meet the deadline for next week. So I think it's worth looking at something here. But I think maybe we would need to think about, the board need to think about if it's possible to make a decision on an amount as large as 7.5 million by next Tuesday. I would also say it is my understanding that the 7.5 million for broadband and the 5 million for capital improvement are not finalized. So I believe that the board, if you guys wish, could have a different purpose for those. And that leads to point B here on committee reports of next steps. That would therefore require having a process for how that would go out and how it would be decided what projects those would be spent on. But don't mean to overstep my boundaries here, but just wanted to throw those out there for your consideration.
No, one of my questions was, what does allocated mean as we look at these ARPA buckets too? So there's funds that are already spent and then there are funds that are allocated.
Yes.
Yes. So this is a relevant discussion to have.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Broadband is one of those. So thank you. Thank you. Further questions?
I just have one. This is
Rhodey.
probably kind of a side issue, but I know that safety of cell towers has been something that has been important to a lot of moms in our county. And so I haven't really heard that addressed here today. So I just think going forward, as we think about all of these things, I just want to make sure that that issue is also looked at. It's like for instance, sometimes I've seen cell towers parked right behind a house, and that's perhaps not the safest thing for the families living in that house. So anyways, just putting it out there as something to consider as we move forward, that we're making sure we're also watching out for the safety of our citizens too.
Absolutely. Site selection is
Right.
very important to do it right. I agree with you, Commissioner.
Any further questions? Thank you, Paul.
Welcome.
Appreciate it. All right, so we were going to discuss the remaining funds, and that's on the last slide in our deck here at 161. Any discussion regarding the remaining funds? And now we know allocated means has not been spent yet. Commissioner Curran?
Yeah, I think that from the Planning and Policy Committee meeting, I think that I know that we're going to put together a proposal for how we're going to fund the foam, but I think that we should definitely consider maybe, if not completely funding it through ARPA, maybe, setting aside a portion of the funding mechanism for that.
Great. I think the intention of this next steps, as I understand it, was to address kind of the remaining ARPA funds and how those are distributed. Where would be the best format, I think is the question here. Commissioner Zostra?
Well, I really appreciate what Commissioner Bottom brought together, because I think it kind of encapsulates some of my thoughts is that, we first looked at this maybe at the beginning of the year is that, there's a number of projects that, were brought to us by the bucket managers, by staff, by parks. And I think it's worthwhile looking at that list, right? And I think I shared that with Chairman Moss in one of the first meetings, right? And that giving commissioners, the ability to kind of go through that list and see if there's anything that really pops out, right? There's some things that I would have liked to have seen back in November being on our, our list that didn't make it, because I think there's a lot of worthwhile projects here. So at least for me, one of the first things I'd like to do is just kind of have all the commissioners kind of go through that list of projects that didn't quite make the cut the first time, and just see if things that pop out and kind of go from there, right? And we can kind of look at them as a group.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
I would just say too, I think there were a lot of townships that wished they had been involved in the process. And I know that there were also perhaps some things from our different departments that wanted consideration. So I would want to go further than just the things that the prior ARPA bucket managers were looking at, and maybe open that up a little further, going back to our county departments and also possibly our townships for additional ideas.
So next steps. Are you looking at some of the projects, Commissioner Rhodey, that came through that didn't make it to the bucket manager, or you want to go beyond that?
Potentially, I think we have heard feedback from some people who have, I think of one township that tried to attend and give input and didn't really feel they had the ability to do that. So maybe we need to look at a way of opening it back up again. I believe we have until 2024 to spend the funds, so we don't have to do this immediately.
So plan being to bring maybe the ARPA remaining funds to the broader board of commissioners for.
If I could make a
Yeah,
suggestion.
please.
Seems like it won't be solved real quick. So maybe finance chair could talk with administration and come up with maybe a systemized way of looking at these, come up with a process and kind of take that route. So we're not just,
Bouncing it.
accepting ideas via email, or whatever. Yeah. Make sure everybody is aware, anybody who needs to know, have an organized way to contact departments, collect the information, things like that. That way it's not just whoever comes first, Yeah.
If I may, Madam Chair, just also, we're going to be entering into a time of budget planning as well. Capital improvement lists from the different department heads. And so in my mind, it's, we've got, the ARPA funds, we're going to have, sort of our budgetary request cycle. And, I'm just curious, like, if you kind of shake that loose, if there's low hanging fruit that, if through this process, it seems like they could kind of, to some degree, mirror each other, come together. Just, we're going to be starting that process here shortly.
I mean, how projects may align, is that what you're thinking? Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that County Administrator Gibbs and I will meet and create a system for review of the ARPA requests that are there, potential requests that are out there.
Yes, and to Roger's point, Commissioner
Then we
Belknap's
go
point,
on.
perhaps incorporate the budget process into that by, for example, having the departments include in their budget request any ARPA ideas they have as well, or something like that, where there could be some level of integration between the two. It sounds like is what I'm hearing.
For building. Yes, Chairman, I'm sorry, Commissioner Moss.
Yeah, I like that idea. It would allow, the department's administration to follow an already set process and just extend it a little bit. That'd be a good way to gather more information. And I don't think we're in any major rush to do this immediately. So I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, just kind of build upon that point. I think the term that it was either under Sheriff Weiss or Chief Tibbetts mentioned, this capability gap, and sort of that sort of process is, we go through the budget cycle with our department heads, we're here, we'd like to be here, and what is that? And is ARPA an opportunity?
Yes, I agree with not rushing the process, but going ahead and taking more time to assess just whatever the needs are.
I'm excited. It's good timing, actually, with the budget year coming up. So wonderful. All right. Yes, Commissioner Evil.
So I know that we talked about, the department heads also participating or including in their budget for next year, applying for some of those or requesting some of those ARPA funds, but we're also talking about the townships, which is what Commissioner Rhoda was saying too. So
Yeah, potentially it would give us time to, see if anything came in that seemed urgent, that was really more, of a county need, that we could consider as well.
All right. So John, you and I can meet. I think my calendar's up to date. So great. All right. Any further discussion on ARPA? Seeing none. Next is public comments. We have public comments.
Karen Obitz, Spring Lake Village. This is like the second or third time that I have sat through a meeting, either of one of your standing committees or a full board, primarily here in the standing committees though, which is where this sort of deliberation would take place, resulting in a delay of approval of grant funding for various projects. So as I listened yet again today to the description of the process for accepting this first EAGLE grant for the Environmental Sustainability Center, I saw absolutely no reason to delay because I understood what I was hearing, that the purpose of accepting that first phase was in fact to do the sort of fact finding that is involved in making a good fiscal decision. So I just want to state again my confusion over not understanding reasons for delay when it seems wise to me to move forward with the first funding on offer. The second thing is that I also picked up a little bit about, I think it was said something like, well, is it also true that the location, if it were to be on Grand Valley's campus, would also be a benefit to the campus or to the school? I worked on a university campus for the bulk of my career. And a campus, a college center, is so much more than just the school itself for this purpose of education. So often a campus is a center for community engagement and being an example of how we as a community want to live in a way that is sustainable, especially in view of our kids. Our sustainable endeavors now will benefit us now, but more so for the future. So all the better that a campus is a center, hopefully, for something like this, if not this particular project in the future. Just look to our schools as a jewel, right? As a place where these sorts of collaborations can take place most productively. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comments?
Hi, Dina Arner.
Holland Township, back again. I did speak to some of you during the break, which was helpful. So they were able to clear up some confusion I had. Apparently the money to pay severance fees and to pay lawyer fees comes out of the general fund. I have yet to hear in this incredibly long involved meeting today where you approved the budget, $15 million of it like that with no discussion, how you intend to pay those severance packages for the employees, the good employees who did nothing wrong that you fired at the drop of a hat for ideological reasons. I have yet to hear how you intend to pay for the growing legal fees for the lawsuits that are going to come out of your attempt to fire a legally hired health director and attempt to install a patently unqualified health director for purely ideological reasons. Those legal fees are mounting. Nobody yet has seen an RFP for why we hired this particular law firm. Were they that much better? Were their fees competitive with other law firms that you considered? No, you didn't consider under other law firms. You hired this law firm for ideological as well as nepotism reasons, and that's all coming out of the general fund. So I would expect to see the same due diligence on those payments that I've seen on the nitpicking for the environmental sustainability grant that isn't even coming out of our pocket. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comments? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and move to adjournment. All those in favor?
I.